Okay, gonna give it a few minutes here and get the live stream up and running, let some people show up. And hopefully this will work out. Looks like I am live as far as I can tell, but I can't get my channel to respond yet. So I'll just wait a few more minutes. And again, let some people join up here. There we go. Looks like it's working now. And first things first, I'm going to make sure that my audio is down. So let me know if the audio is okay for you guys. Good audio. Glad to hear it. Yeah, it's been a while. I figured it's been a little bit boring here recently, so I thought we'd get on here and do a live stream and kind of keep the live stream pulse going a little bit here. I was thinking about doing one the last few weeks also, but there wasn't really too much to talk about. And we do have some more active weather coming on here, so I thought we'd go ahead and give it a go. Puget Sound Storm Watch in the house. Welcome everybody. Patricia Higley, Ryan Heinzman, Ryan Boltalainen in the house, Enumclaw in the house. Audio okay, good to hear it. Yeah, pretty striking picture here when you take a look at the infrared. It's pretty. I mean, you could do to see the amount of cold air spilling across the western portions of Alaska there, the Bering Sea out across the Aleutians, and then you've got that troughing here, and then the big ridge here, and you can imagine it's just bringing that jet stream and that warm, moist conveyor belt back up into Southeast Alaska. And I mean, some of it's a little bit warmer on the south side of this here, but this is still pretty chilly up to the north on that. But yeah, California getting a break from the precipitation for a while, and we're getting this pretty persistent light rainfall. This is not my favorite weather here in the short term. I mean, we're just getting the gray skies and some light rainfall. I'd rather see some wind and some showers, maybe some thunderstorms, some snow or some wind, but that'll be coming here in due time as we go through this upcoming week. A bunch of nerds in the house. That's right. Live from Federal Way, Skunk Alley. Yeah, I got some moderators in here. That's always good to see. Yeah, so yeah, there's your Doppler radar. Actually, the rainfall looks like it's picking up a little bit here. I was going to walk the dog and hope it was going to stop a little bit. It looks like it's picking up though here across some of the Puget Sound. Not as much across Oregon, but yeah, this dirty ridge will be with us for a little bit here, but then we're going to switch things up. In fact, we can actually take a look at that. I'm going to go ahead and let's go to the European. And we'll close this down here. We're going to go to the oceanic. I want to show you guys the infrared satellite imagery and kind of show you how this changes from this huge ridge out over the Pacific Ocean and the troughing well off to our north, and how that's going to transition as we go on into next week. So let's do a simulated infrared satellite. You can kind of see it here. Actually, let's go a little bit wider. Let's go northern wide view. There we go. So I was pointing out this cold air out here across the Bering Sea, coming across the Aleutians, and you can see the ridge of high pressure out here across some of the Northeast Pacific Ocean. And again, there's that storm track up into Southeast Alaska. Now let's scroll through here and you'll see the ridge still in charge, and we're kind of still on what is known as the dirty side of this ridge. And then we got kind of that little atmospheric river characteristic pointed at the Pacific Northwest. But you notice how quickly things flatten out. And let me back that up and toggle through that again. Look at this cold air just absolutely rip across the Gulf of Alaska. And that starts to pour into western BC and portions of western Washington as we go on in through the early portion of next week. So that starts to really arrive, and that frontal system's really kicking through as we go through to the end Sunday. We might get some convergent zone activity on the day Sunday as well, and maybe again on Monday. As you can see, we get this cold air spilling in, and the ridge is still there. It's just off further to the south, and then we're getting a taste of this polar vortex here swinging through, and definitely a big pattern change as we go through next week. So hopefully that makes sense, that transition there. We'll scroll a little bit further, and you can see the jet stream is going to continue to be pointed right at the Pacific Northwest here. Probably a little bit more BC and Washington versus Oregon, but I mean, we're out 174 hours and just some continuous active weather coming in. A little bit of some windier solutions here in some of the previous model runs, but again, we're not going to write that off as well. There's windstorm potential, there's big mountain snows, atmospheric rivers, some big wave action, and yeah, we'll just kind of watch this as we go, and I'll try to answer some questions and check out the chat here. Ocean Park, Washington. Vancouver and Lower Mainland weather Facebook on page on Facebook. Yeah, we got a good weather community here in the Pacific Northwest. We got several people who run YouTube channels. A lot of them are more chaser related. There's Matthew Fab, who does one in Federal Way that concentrates more on Western Washington weather and stuff like that. He goes to the UW, and Ryan is always doing media stuff up in British Columbia and Mark Stewart's a chaser here in the Pacific Northwest, also photographer, professional. And we got Washington Weather Chasers, another well-known storm chaser out here in the Pacific Northwest, and it's almost storm chasing time in Tornado Alley as well. In fact, we almost went out this week to go chase, but I figured the chances of seeing some good daytime stuff were not very high with this setup, and that probably, it looks like it's coming to fruition here. So I'll probably be going chasing out in the plains at times as we go through April, May, and June, as I do every single year. I look to spend a few long stretches out there also. Check the new weather model stuff here as well. Kent Washington in the house. Yeah, there'll be some cold air aloft here, and we'll get some convergent zone activity. Even when you get the strong Dr. Jonas Miller, Dirty Ridge that tastes. I don't know. We were wondering if we thought that Dr. Jonas Miller was Oregon's best storm chaser, Garrett Hartung, but then they were showing up at the same time. So I don't know what to think of it now. So I don't know who. I see Mark is in here and Ryan. So I don't know who Dr. Jonas Miller is. I guess we're still trying to solve that mystery. But thanks for the generosity. I don't know. I thought that was Garrett for a little bit, but then he was showing up when Dr. Jonas Miller was in the house. So yeah, so when you get these, when you get this cold air aloft, sometimes when you bring the convergent zones in here, sometimes when you do have the onshore flow, you can still bring the snow level pretty down close to the surface here, and especially across some of the higher hilltops, across some of Western Washington, Western Oregon. Once you get some elevation and you get enough cold air flying in fast enough here, and you bring some pretty vigorous convergent zones, you can really start to bring down some lower snow levels, even on in through portions of March. You get some convective activity. You can still drop some snow pellets. You can cover the road with hail. You can bring some snow down to the lower elevations as well, even in March. It happened in April before, it can happen. So anyway, let's back this up a little bit here. This is the artificial intelligence. This is the 18Z. So again, there's that ridge, it transitioned us in that much colder air moving in aloft over it. So that's going to give us that chance for really building some mountain snows and maybe some lower snow levels at times. This is not going to be a huge Arctic outbreak or anything like that. We're not going to have snow and ice sticking down to the I-5 corridor or anything like that. But again, if you have some elevation or you're east of the mountains, higher terrain, things like that, and we'll watch for those convergent zones here over the next few days as well. Yep, the Twister memes and the Twister sayings, sound clips never get old. So now if we take a look at that, we compare it to, there's the European Artificial Intelligence. And you can see the GraphCast, that's Google's artificial intelligence model. It continues to be a little bit on the chillier side. And if we scroll a little bit further out, you notice why we get a secondary system kind of riding through. That'd be about Thursday afternoon. And if we look at the GraphCast on that, it's also chillier here. And the GraphCast has actually been outperforming the artificial intelligence at times. They're both pretty good, and the ensembles are pretty good as well. But there it is. The GraphCast shows a pretty chilly air mass staying with us as we go towards the end of next week. Scroll a little bit further off, and you can see these, this temperature gradient here is going to be pretty strong as we go all the way on in through the following week. Let me back that up a little bit there. As we go through the following weekend, you can kind of see the ridge down here, the troughing, and we're going to get this westerly flow. We're going to remain active here on in through the mid portion of March, most likely. Jonathan Pulley in the house. Whidbey Island. So Jonathan's another member of the Pacific Northwest chasers out here and whatnot as well. So he lives in Whidbey Island. He does a YouTube channel as well. And there's Garrett Hartung. Give me ridging or give me Garrett's partial to the ridging for some reason. Garrett's a meteorologist down there in Western Oregon. Is it going to snow in Canada? You might see some snow pellets or some small hail or something like that. You might get some convective activity or whatnot, a convergent zone, or maybe some showers. Just when you bring this cold air in aloft in March, you bring those nice, convective showers in, and it can be pretty interesting even into March. And I've seen snow in Seattle in April, so you can't rule it out. And that would also mean good things for the mountains. So we have that to look forward to. What was that? Does anybody off the top of their head, April 2013 or 14, we had some snow. I remember in 2008, April, we had snow in Seattle. I can't remember. I thought we had one after that as well, but I can't recall it off the top of my head. I got too much going on. La Center, Washington, checking in. Kameshwari, Kate. It was 2012. Okay. Yeah, but no, it can happen for sure. Even at the lower elevations, you get the right combination of convergent zone activity, and you can bring down some lower snow levels. Got somebody from San Diego on the house. Okay, so let's do this. Let's go to... I'm not as used to this one as I am the other. We'll go to temperature anomaly, and we're going to go to the graph cast here as well, and we're going to push this one through. So here we are now. So you can see how the temperature aloft is working with this. You can really see the ridging. And actually, let me do this also. We're going to go North America, and I'm going to bounce that one out of here. And we're going to go to the North American map. So you can see that ridging in the warm air off our coastline. But it's not taking much time. This thing is on the fast track into the Pacific Northwest here. And so when this Arctic air, it comes across Alaska and it's coming over the Pacific Ocean, and you expect it to go through some modification at the lower levels, in which it does. But still, it's pretty chilly aloft. So when you get these convective showers, it can tap into some of that pretty chilly air aloft. So if things line up right, again, you can get some of that lower elevation snowfall. Going to continue to scroll out a little bit more. We're out going towards next Friday and next week, and then there's that pretty chilly air still hanging on here. And you can see a lot of Alaska is pretty darn right cold. There's some of Western Canada also. And we're kind of on the line there in the Pacific Northwest, where we might be getting some atmospheric river activity here, that ridging here with the troughing, like gears in the machine, pretty potent pressure gradient, strong jet stream into kind of Washington, Northern Oregon, Southwest BC. Yeah, that's the thing about La Nina winters sometimes as well. They can hang on pretty chilly all the way on in through March and April, and you start to almost get like a cabin fever thing where it's like, okay, I'm ready for spring. You're still getting showers and cooler than normal temperatures and rainfall, and you're just ready for it to be over. Oh, look at $2 Chuck in the house. Thank you for your generosity, sir. Thanks, Michael. Still stuck in Central California till late March, but looking forward to introducing the kids to some early spring Pacific Northwest weather action. Central California. So you guys are... Actually, you're probably dealing with some pretty nice weather here, though, over the next couple weeks at least. So I'm kind of jealous on that for you. You're losing the snowpack, though, down there. Thanks for the generosity, sir. And now, speaking of that, since I did mention the jet stream, I wanted to look at that here as well. We'll look at, first we'll do 500 millibar wind. Did that come up? There we go. I'll cut these down here. We'll take a look at 250 millibar. 250 millibars is right around 34,000 feet. If you want to know why I know that stuff so readily, it's because when you work in aviation, you learn this stuff and you deal with it so much, it just kind of sticks in your head. So there's the ridge. Then we get that air just flying in here. Look at that 500 millibars. That's about 18,000 feet. The wind just ripping back into Washington and Oregon, troughing out over the Gulf of Alaska. Now we're going to scroll down a little bit more, and we're going to go to 250 millibars. So that's at about 34,000 feet. And you can see what these mean these wind speeds also over here. If you take a look over to the top right, max wind speed, you can see on the north side of this ridge, you can see you're up over 180 knots. That's over 200 miles per hour there. The big river in the sky. So that's why they call it the jet stream. And look at that, 188, 188.5. That is well over 200 miles per hour there. And as that starts to point at the Pacific Northwest, it's still pretty robust. You can see right off the coastline there, it's still screaming at 156 knots, just pointed right down into Oregon and Washington, and it kind of stays with us. Look at that, back up towards 170 knots, and that troughing stays there. And you can see that jet stream just right into the Pacific Northwest. Look at that 175 right. Nope, that 175, that's way over here. That's across the North Atlantic. Never mind. Got to remember to look for stuff like that. Okay, what did I miss here? Checking up on the chat here. Thanks everybody for joining. It got like about 350 people in the chat. Yeah, I don't. That's a good question. I see that from Brian 7281. There, any insight what's going on with the European deterministic this year? They've been exceptionally bad. I've been talking to Garrett. He gets some verification scores and stuff like that, and he kind of mentions it to me once in a while. And some of the deterministic model runs have been just absolutely terrible. And I've really noticed that as well. So I've been kind of trying to stick with the artificial intelligence. But yeah, the European deterministic is not its old self. And I wonder if this is just a lack of observational data that we have, and that's kind of playing into this. I don't know otherwise. I haven't looked that deeply into it, but I do know that it has been scoring extremely poorly. And I mean, it's not really trustworthy at all, really more than a couple days out at most. And it does not seem like that was always the case, obviously. Yeah, I worry about the snowpack. We are going to get a nice shot though. I mean, we are going to get a nice shot of snowfall here. And that's really important because we need, we need to delay the melt off. It's good for, the ecology of the region. You want that snowpack there. It reduces, it stops the land from warming up quicker. The quicker you melt out, the darker soil starts to come out and the darker grasses and things, and that in turn absorbs more heat, and then it starts to dry out quicker when you go off in through the springtime, and causes all kinds of problems there. You don't have the snow melt runoff that's so critical to the region. And then you worry about fires and things like that. So yeah, the snowpack is very crucial here in the Pacific Northwest. Something I've been looking at here as well. I've been reading a lot of studies on that. And if you look here, I don't know if this is big enough for you guys to see, but right here it says the Cascades. Overall, the West Snowpack provides about 53% of the runoff, and only 37% of the precipitation across the West falls as snow. So it's very important to runoff. But around 3/4 of it originates as snowmelt, and it's even higher for the Cascades. Around 75% is from snowmelt runoff into our region. So it is our most important reservoir here. I mean, we do have some reservoirs up there, but it's not nearly as important as the snowmelt. And then you can see how climate change threatens snowpack and things like that. There's all kinds of stuff like that in these studies, but there's a whole bunch of studies here that I brought up. You can see in the scientific literature that a lot of them, it's right around 75%. The contribution snow to runoff over the Western USA, and citing over other literature. So yeah, I just wanted to run that by people as well. So it's extremely important. Don't let anybody ever tell you otherwise. It's not just as simple as dumping a bunch of water up in the reservoirs or having rainfall in the mountains. That stuff, it runs off pretty quickly when it rains. The snow stays up there, melts into the soil. It feeds streams as you go on in through the early spring. And then when you get off in towards the later portion of spring, if you still have snow up there, you're still getting the nice runoff that can continue to fill those reservoirs, continue to fill those streams, and that benefits farmers, very much. And unless you've been hiding under a rock, the West Coast here and then much of the Intermountain West has been well above normal. These are pretty substantial here since last September 6th through March 5th there. We've been a lot of Washington, Eastern Washington, 4 to 6 degrees above normal. That's a big difference there. And some of Western Washington has been pretty warm as well. A lot of Oregon. I mean, there's really no place that's been cooler than normal. Just one little dot there in the central Oregon Cascades. But yeah, catch up on the chat here. Let's see. The Lower Mainland. Thanks for watching. Indeed. The Google AI model, it looks like was performing better. I saw some of that come across in some of the data that I saw. It's pretty close. I mean, the artificial intelligence, the European is pretty good as well. And especially its ensembles are pretty darn right good. It's one of the best tools we have. But yeah, the GraphCast has been outperforming it by a little bit also. Yeah, I mean, we could. Jonathan Pulley mentions that about hoping that we have a delayed summer and wet late spring. It's possible. I mean, we still have kind of La Nina conditions out there, but we're probably going through a pretty rapid transition here towards El Nino coming up. I was going to show that as well. Let me do this. I think this is it. If I can't bring it up. It's somewhere in here. I don't know why it didn't come up, but I know it's in here somewhere. It's pretty cool. You can actually go to the European site here and you can actually go through this and you can get free European model data on your own, and you can actually put it to other portions of the world and whatnot too. So you can see I'm kind of scrolling through this and looking for stuff. Sometimes I just like browsing through here and seeing what kind of tools they have. But there is some pretty interesting stuff. I think I'm getting close here, but scroll down a little bit more. So this is the El Nino anomaly plume. This is Nino 3.4, the equatorial Pacific Ocean. You guys watch my educational videos there on La Nina, El Nino Southern Oscillation. We're in La Nina right now, but we're kind of rapidly coming out of that. And you can see what European shows here. There's still some difficulty with these forecasts here. So this is not set in stone yet, but things are kind of pointing towards potentially a moderate or strong El Nino. Take that with a grain of salt still. Well, it doesn't, there's nothing you can really do about it anyway. And we'll just kind of check this over the next few months. Oh, and Washington Weather Chasers in the house. Yeah, thanks for the generosity, sir. When can I expect to see snow drifts up to my second story windows? Good job, Mike. Keep it up. I always dream about the old snowstorms. I mean, February 1989, we had like a foot of snow in my courtyard, and there was literally 4 to 5 foot drifts, and that was just south of Seattle. I mean, I often wonder what it would be like here in the social media. The entire Pacific Northwest is kind of locked up in social media. And for example, the National Weather Service Seattle is the most followed National Weather Service office in the country. So it'll probably be pretty crazy stuff. And especially in a place like Seattle, where it doesn't necessarily snow a lot every single year. And sometimes we skip a year in getting snowfall, and sometimes we don't get much for a few years. And then all of a sudden you get a big dump, and it can really throw things off kilter. And it gets really crazy here across the region. So I really want some of the younger new meteorologists to see some of those huge winter storms that I know we can get here, but we just haven't had much luck here recently. We had February 2019 and whatnot, and those were decent snowfalls. But yeah, I wish they would happen a little more often. I mean, that's just my opinion though. Yeah, I've got a buddy who lives out there as well, up kind of near the Okanagan River out there, and he just mentioned how muddy it was like a month ago, and it's just like it's a mess and not much snow at all. So, yeah, I feel for you off in the backcountry. So Garrett brings a good point up right here. So the artificial intelligence ensembles are about as good as are good at upper air patterns in the 11 to 15 day as the deterministic models are for the 6 to 10. So that's a huge bonus. I mean, you're talking about a 5-day lead time when you look at ensembles versus the control runs. So the deterministic runs, we take the initial conditions, and that's what we understand the atmosphere to be, and we just run it out based on the physics of those initial conditions. the ensembles, we tweak those initial conditions and then we let those run out. And you kind of see how they do that with the Nino 3.4 sea surface temperature anomaly plume. And you can see the individual ensemble members here. So they tweak initial conditions and then they let these run out. And you can kind of see the variability starts to go quite large as you look off into the forecast. The same thing goes with 500 millibars or whatever else you want to look at here. When you change the initial conditions, you're going to have pretty big differences down the line. And if you take things like the ensemble mean, they can be very effective tools when you look out far into the forecast, like Garrett Hartung is mentioning there, the 11 to 15 day, you know, ensemble members are doing as well as the deterministics are in the 6 to 10. So it's a big plus. David Lee, weather. I have 3 feet drifts right now. You got, where are you located, David Lee? Send me some pictures. Oh, joke. Okay. You're getting us all excited here. Yeah, depending on, I mean, I wouldn't rule out some snow like but on the higher hills, like if you're in Southwest or if you're in Vancouver and some of the lower mainland there, you could get some, but probably up away from sea level for the most part. But who knows? Maybe we'll get lucky. I mean, this is a pretty interesting looking pattern coming in here. I mean, there's some pretty cold air aloft running back into the region. If you guys missed that, here, I'll show you. There's 850 millibars. And you can see the cold air that's arriving. I mean, we get a pretty good shot of it. Then we get another shot of it towards the end of next week, maybe even a little bit chillier there. So maybe we'll get lucky and start to bring that snow level down a little bit here. And maybe we'll get to play for some snow pellets or some small hail in the lowlands. Is that Waterville? Yeah, and Washington Weather Chasers on Facebook. He was showing me some things on Facebook as well. So yeah, he's one of the chasers here in the Pacific Northwest community. So thanks for the generosity there, Ben. And Nathan Gomez, thanks for the generosity. Thanks for all you do. You are welcome. Yeah, man, I was born too late. I didn't get to see the winter of 68, 69. What I wouldn't give for that to happen again. I mean, my goodness, that winter was epic. So I'm using weathermodels.com right now. So one of my acquaintances, Ryan Mayu, I think I'm pronouncing his name right. We chat online sometimes and we kind of go back and forth. Sometimes we argue, sometimes we talk about stuff, but we're cordial for the most part. But yeah, he gave me full access to his website here. So there's all kinds of cool stuff on here, including all the artificial intelligence models and stuff. So I'm trying to get better with this site. Weatherbell is a little bit more pleasing to the eye, so I tend to use it a little bit more, but this has been pretty nice also. And looking at the NVIDIA model and Google and the Huawei and comparing it is pretty fun. But yeah, we have a lot of rainfall coming for some portions of the Pacific Northwest here coming up. So there's not going to be any immediate drought here for west of the Cascades for sure. I just hope that it brings huge amounts of snow to the upper elevations. Let's flood it again. Yeah, that flooding was pretty wild. I gotta say. And I mentioned that on X. I talked about that a little bit, but the amount of sediment and the amount of sand that came down in the Green River, I don't know if the White was like that, but the Green River from Renton all the way back down into Seattle, when I drove by it today to pick up my daughter, there was so much sediment in the banks of the Green River. And so I messaged my wife who works for the Army Corps of Engineers. And I was like, because I keep forgetting to ask her this. I'm like, was there a huge release of the dams that would have brought all that sediment down? And she was like, yes, absolutely. So yeah, they were releasing enough water behind the dams that it was just launching huge amounts of sand and sediment out into the river. So, and it's amazing. I mean, they're like 15, 20 feet high berms, long, wide berms down the riverbank, like covering old blackberry bush groves and things like that. So really, it was pretty crazy looking stuff. If you get a chance to go down to the Green River, and maybe in Renton or anywhere down there between there and Seattle where I was looking, it was pretty intense. Still flooded fields in the Kent Valley. Western Washington weather sees it from the sounder every week. That's wild too. Yeah, you figure you're down there in the valley. It's like, where does the water run? It comes out of the river and then just sits there until it dries out. La Nina is such a trip. I mean, that's the thing about this is this high out here. This is actually La Nina driven here for right now. I mean, but usually in La Nina, we get where it bounces around more and it backs up to the west a little bit more, and you get more of this north flow back down into the region. And it's just not happening too much, but it does flatten out a little bit there. So that's what we have coming. You can see the jet stream is going to be switching it up. The model's been showing it for a few days, so we have some nice changes coming up here. Cascade Forest is full of dead growth and fuels. The fires of time and place are a good thing. That's the thing. Back in the day where there were no houses and there were very few humans out there, you could bring huge fires across regions and the forest will redevelop and you'll kill, you know, deadly insect. You'll kill beetles and you'll kill all kinds of stuff and it'll reset the entire region with huge fires. But that's not very popular now with a lot of humans across the region. You don't want to just unleash a bunch of fires and you burn everybody's house down on the east slopes of the Cascades or around Lake Chelan. Now you go put them out. And so that's why fires are much less, we have a lot less actual forest fires than we used to because we're so good at putting them out. We're really efficient at spotting these fires and getting on them and putting them out, before they really become a big problem. That wasn't the case back in the early 1900s. We didn't have, planes out there and helicopters and a bunch of people spotting fires all the time. We didn't have the same kind of technology that we could just go out and put these fires out. So that's the problem. Yeah, we're probably building up a lot of fuels. I'm not an expert on this or anything, but I would assume they're probably building up some pretty good fuels. I know that Garrett probably knows more about this than I do, and there's some other people that are probably in this chat that know more about what kind of fuels have actually built up over the last few decades across the Pacific Northwest and some of the backcountry there, but I assume that it's probably more than it used to be. So if a big fire ever got going and we had a problem putting it out, then it could probably get pretty crazy. Yeah, there people will overhype. Yeah, it will get overhyped for sure. La Nina. And a lot of times it delivers with pretty good winters, but sometimes it doesn't. I mean, that's not really a climate change thing either. It's just kind of La Nina, El Nino. When this pattern gets going, it doesn't always guarantee a certain thing. I mean, 2016, that jet stream pointed well far north, back up into the Pacific Northwest, and California got left high and dry. And it didn't really, that strong El Nino didn't bring the big rains that they thought they were going to get. It was just because of a little bit of a displacement there from that southwest flow back up into the Pacific Northwest. So, yeah, and that can happen during La Nina years as well. Yeah, the MJO has big implications on pattern changes like this for sure. I actually haven't looked at it in a few days. I need to look at that again here. Yeah, when you look at it, you see, like you're saying there, when you look at it, you see that the El Nino years are pretty, you'll see that they're most often below normal, but then there's always that exception every, whatever, however often there's that exception where you can get some above average snowfalls during an El Nino year, but the dice are definitely favored towards below normal snowfall across the mountains. It depends on that. A lot of that depends on the Southern Oscillation Index as well. You can kind of see that better in the Southern Oscillation Index. But that's only really one way to measure it, and there's other ways, but like somebody talked about, you can get the atmosphere coupling even in kind of relatively weak La Niñas. You can still get the atmosphere to couple. And you can see our last kind of El Nino that it showed up pretty strong, but the Southern Oscillation Index did kind of reflect that, but it wasn't as much as what we've had during some El Ninos in the past. Ronald Spins, thanks for the generosity. California needed to learn about controlled burns. Yeah, and the problem in California too is that they do get, those fires are a different beast than what usually burns up here in the Pacific Northwest. We don't, California can go through some pretty dry periods. It's much warmer, and yeah, so they can really make the fires much more difficult to fight. You can't really fight a firestorm too effectively like what happens sometimes in California. But yeah, it's been kind of showing that actually December was right there at neutral. But yeah, the red here is when El Nino was in effect. You can see the one way back in 83. I mean, look at that. It was really strong Southern Oscillation Index. And what I'm talking about here is you've got the sea level difference between Tahiti and Darwin, Australia. And there's other ways to measure this as well, but it kind of tells you if you're in, what kind of circulation you're in across the Pacific Ocean. That has makes a big difference on where the ridges and the troughs are setting up. Some of these climate prediction center stuff is that's not very effective. I'm not going to go into that right now. Let's go through some other stuff here. There's the 15-day precipitation anomaly. This one is hot off the presses, the 18Z stuff. You can see that pretty sharp cutoff there. I mean, it's been locked in. It's been locked in for a few days. You've been watching my videos daily. You know this is just kind of absolutely just been locked in here. Yeah, we had some pretty lame La Niñas also. Yeah, back in 2000, 2001. We had, I think, a triple dip La Nina back then, and we did have, like, I remember I lived in Kent East Hill at that time, and we did have snowfall. But yeah, there wasn't any huge storms. Pump Tulips, Washington, out on the coast. Nice, thank you. Just did a blog on the SJO. So Garrett just sent this. And so runoff analysis. So you can see this is a pretty good signal. So when you think, okay, we're headed towards El Nino or we're going to be in La Nina and neutral, you're kind of like, it could go either way. La Nina tends to be a little bit higher historical runoff versus El Nino. So thanks, Garrett, for this. He just sent this over. And so with April to September stream flow at the Dalles, good proxy for snowpack. So you can see, if you look at this, look at that. There's the baseline right here. You do have some El Nino years that you can have more, including 69. And you have some La Nina years that are below. So if you get like, 2001, in fact, we just talked about that. So it's kind of interesting that it was right here. And yeah, we mentioned it wasn't that great with the snowfall. But yeah, that was, you'd be like, well, it's supposed to be La Nina. What's going on here? And you're like, oh, well, that's just kind of the natural variability of this entire Southern Oscillation Index. Ski resort snow levels are not good. That's what I understand. That's what I've been seeing. That's what I've seen pictures of. People that live up there have been talking to me and telling me it is not good. But we're definitely going to get a nice shot of some snowfall here coming up. Yeah, there is some wind potential next week, but it backed off a little bit on here. I'm going to show you the latest on that. We're going to go to, actually, we'll do this. We're going to go to Artificial intelligence 18Z, because I have not looked at this yet. I want to kind of check this out, what it says. So here we go, going on in towards Sunday. So we start that onshore flow. You can see maybe some convergence zone activity there on Sunday. And now what we're looking for here, you can see the isobars out here. We're looking for low pressures. We got the high pressure right off the California coastline there. Get a frontal system there. Looks like it comes in on Wednesday morning. And I'm trying to look to see if we have anything else coming there. There's a low coming towards the coastline there. And some of the models were showing that system being stronger there. You got to watch it at this time frame, though. It's kind of looks like a late developing storm right towards the coastline. So right now, there's no big windstorm that's imminent or anything like that. And then you can see the atmospheric river just kind of plowing towards us with kind of a deeper low out here towards Haida Gwaii. And maybe swinging some wind through there. So no major windstorm that we are going to start focusing on just yet, but that can change pretty quickly, and then we'll just kind of see how that trends. Oh yeah, the Michigan stuff. Yeah, Mark Stewart was sharing some of that in the chat today. Yeah, there was probably EF3, EF4 tornado that came through. There were fatalities, and it wiped out, looks like a home development. So yeah, getting a kick to some pretty nasty tornadoes already here in early March. At least 2 people were killed yesterday in Oklahoma. I donated to their GoFundMe there this morning. A mother and a daughter killed. And then today I know there was several deaths at least today also. Yeah, so yeah, Puget Sound Storm Watch mentioned that 2% zero sig zone. So yeah, they weren't expecting strong tornadoes at that. Yeah, the Pacific Decadal Oscillate. Let me see if I can bring that up here. Let's do this. Because it was pretty low. Now the Pacific, the PDO is kind of, it's almost like an aftercast sometimes, but you can see we are in really pretty low territory here. We have moderated some, but you can see these cycles, and they call it a decadal oscillation, but it's hard to pick out these patterns. So you can kind of see we had one that went from what, 1896. I mean, what did that go through? I mean, you might call that like a 30, 40-year period right there, and maybe a period of cooler here that we're going through. But it's still kind of hard to pick that out. You can see the decadal oscillation. But again, there's kind of some variability in here that kind of, I don't know, maybe you could call that, what is that, 48 to 57. So that's about a decade right there. They usually mention, I think, that they were going in some kind of 30-year oscillations, but it's, I need to read some more recent literature on this as well. But yeah, you can see that we have been here, though, over the last few years. Pacific Decadal Oscillation has been on the negative side, which usually tends to bring us cooler than normal winters, but it hasn't really so much been the case either. Yeah, and then there's stuff like the whole Pacific Basin, like Garrett's mentioning, has been above average, and then it's been just slightly less than above normal in the West Pacific, and it's kind of a little tricky here. You can look at the raw data for that. I'm eventually going to plug some of this into my CTAC data there as well. But yeah, for those of you guys who missed it or just joining, here's where we're headed on in towards the summer and the fall. At least that's what the weather models are saying. You know, we'll see how that goes. Precipitation's been more of a mixed bag here, though, across the Pacific Northwest, as you can see. Western Oregon not doing too hot, and Puget Sound not doing that well also. More of a mixed bag across Eastern Washington and Oregon. Got to bounce this back out here as well. Okay, let's put that in. You can see with the GFS, the 18Z, so hopefully nobody shares that today. And, you know, I don't mind if somebody like I didn't have that much like somebody shared this yesterday and it was not I don't really have that much of a problem. If somebody's having fun and saying, look what the GFS shows, I don't have a problem with that. I might make a joke like, oh, why are you showing us that or something? But I don't really have a problem with this. But you just have to know that this is not to be taken seriously. I mean, you can kind of see that there's a problem. Obviously, we're not going to be underneath a foot of snow or 2 feet of snow in Olympia and Tacoma there. So, like I mentioned today, what happens with the GFS when it gets over 168 hours in the forecast, something like that, is the resolution really drops off to like 44 miles. So you can imagine 44 miles from Seattle towards the Cascades, you're not going to have a very good sample of what the terrain is like here. You're just not going to get terrain features showing up that well. So yeah, that's why it shows some of the terrain from, or some of the snow from the higher terrain is bleeding into some of the lower elevations here. So when you look at these models, take that with a major grain of salt there. So yeah, there's your latest GFS, just kind of having some fun with it there. We'll look at the 12Z data there as well. Again, you can kind of see some of the issues, but yeah, whatever. Looking at the European, though, it does have better resolution. It looks like that. I don't think that resolution changes throughout the entirety of the 360 hours of its forecast. So you can see it does show the potential maybe for some kind of convergence zone stuff, that cold air aloft, maybe some convection going on. But of course, you are not going to be getting big snowfalls down into the lower elevations of Seattle or Western Washington right now. Yeah, that's the thing about fire season here. If you can have quite a bit of acreage burning, but if you're not really flooding metro areas with smoke, then it really doesn't get a lot of headlines, really. I mean, but a couple of years ago when British Columbia burned, I mean, that was like the record amount they had burned. I forget exactly the time period that happened in, but that was extremely noteworthy. And yeah, we didn't hear a lot of media coverage about it here. We heard some, but probably not as much as we should have. Now, I mean, if I don't care if you're making fun of the GFS and you're having fun with it, it doesn't matter. You just got to throw that caveat out there. The problem is with the okay, do I want to go here? The problem is that we've had people that are pretty well established here across the region that were showing these kind of maps, these deterministic model runs, and saying, you know, we have huge snow dumps coming and we're going to have 12 plus feet across the higher terrain and stuff. And then nothing of the sort happened. And it's just because you're looking at the deterministic model runs and you're looking at the GFS and it's not one of our better performing models. And it just kind of way overdoes some of these snowfalls. And we had some of the same people repeatedly doing this during the season. And we just have not got the big dumps of snowfall that were being forecast. So that's kind of the bigger issue here, because then I get a lot of questions like, hey, so-and-so said we're going to get a bunch of snowfall. And I'm like, okay, that doesn't look like it's actually happening. And so I don't know. You can say what you want, but yeah, I'm just here to educate people. So I'll just continue to correct other people as it goes. I'm not going to sit here and name names so much though anymore or anything like that. I'm going to try to keep it a little bit more civil, but yeah. Yeah, that's the thing here too. You can really, like Garrett mentions, the severity of the fire season depends on starts and short-term weather conditions. It's not a bad fire season if we don't have a bunch of starts, even with drought. That's the thing here is, you know, a lot of these fires are human caused, and sometimes we'll get lightning that comes over the Cascades and causes fires as well. But, you know, sometimes you can have pretty nasty conditions and you don't get the starts and the fires don't burn. And sometimes you can, you know, if we go through drought or we warm things up pretty dramatically over the period of a few weeks, you can really bring some pretty nasty fire conditions into the region pretty quickly. Yeah, what was that one started? The Eagle Creek was started by fireworks, and then it just went out of control. And it matters where these fires burn a lot of times too. Sometimes we just don't have great access to it, and then it's just too much risk to firefighters, and it's just very difficult to fight. But we are a lot better at it than we were back in the early 1900s and whatnot, where, you know, you go off into the east slopes of the Cascades, and it's hard to not to find where people aren't living, and even in some of the higher Cascades out there, and well up into the Olympic Mountains, there's people living everywhere. Humans have taken over this planet here. So when fires go up, people want them out. If I lived out there, I wouldn't want to see my house burn either. I have friends that live in Lake Chelan, right on the lake out there. And that's a big fear out there, as these fires getting out of control and burning around the lake and up and down the Cascade Crest and east slopes of the Cascades and up into Northeast Washington and the Oregon Cascades. Remember a few years ago, the fires we had going, and that smoke was just pumping back down into Western Oregon. That was some of the craziest stuff ever. I mean, that was just absolutely wild. I remember driving down there with a couple storm chasing friends, and we were down there, and it was just like, yeah, I mean, I don't even know. It was like being in a smokehouse. It was just absolutely crazy. You could barely breathe outside the car sometimes. Yeah, I might do some live streaming here coming up here as I get on the. Yeah, I'll probably have to choose and pick. That's a good reminder for me here too. Yeah, I might do some snow if there's going to be some waves. I might do that also. It's going to see and look what the waves are. Let's see what kind of fetch we have coming up here with some of this stuff. Actually, let's go to. Okay, let's just look at maximum individual wave height. So there we go. We start to pick up some of the wave action. I mean, we get some bigger waves going on there. What is that? Next Thursday, I got to go out to the coast one more time to do some wave watching. That one goes way north of us. So, I mean, nothing too crazy coming into the Pacific Northwest, but there are a few rounds of some bigger waves. I mean, wave watching isn't over yet. There's likely to be some. I find it hard to believe we're not going to have some kind of fairly robust low move towards the coastline in this upcoming sequence over the next couple of weeks, but we'll see. There's no guarantees with that also. You're getting some bigger waves there as you go through Wednesday night, Thursday, off in towards, that's actually not too far away. That's next week. Yeah, there's always stuff like that to take into consideration with fire danger across the region, especially California. Those wet springs, you grow that grass and then you dry it out in the early summer. You've got a lot of fuel there. If you do get fire starts, then things can get crazy. Cold and rainy here on Carbon River at base of Mount Rainier, man. Well, we're going to turn it to some snow here for you, though, as we go through Monday. Yeah, I've been looking for some of that data. So what Adrian P. Falla says, about 93% of the sites have experienced a decrease in April 1st snowpack since the 50s, with decline averaging about 23%. The water desk, April 21st, 2024. And I also wanted to do this. Let's go ahead and go to regions. We're going to go to the Pacific Northwest. We're going to watch Sundays. We're going to take a look at Sunday's system here because this one looks a little bit interesting here also. So we're going to go to, first, let's do this. I want to see if there's any kind of cape coming in with this system at all. How much instability do we have on the day Sunday? And the European kind of underdoes some of this. So when you get convergence zone activity, if you see any of these blues out there, there's probably going to be a little bit of a lightning strike potential there on Sunday. We go through Monday. Let's see. Maybe Monday there as well. There we go. We got some instability there on Monday also. So with the onshore flow and some of these showers moving through, maybe Sunday, Monday. What about Tuesday? There's a little bit of instability around on Tuesday. It's not a lot, but it's east of the mountains there also. Keith Capolero, thanks for the generosity. Thanks for following my channel, K-Dog Weather. Oh, yeah, I think I did that the other day, didn't I? And there's Thursday, still some instability around. Now let's do this. Is it going to show up anything for Sunday? Nope. Okay, so not showing much there for Sunday. What about Monday? Monday is better. As you saw, we had some instability around. We might get a couple lightning strikes lower mainland, Western Washington. What about Tuesday? Tuesday maybe as well, maybe even east of the mountains, maybe Spokane, maybe Tri-Cities. And of course, that is because I see the anomaly because we got wind on there too. So again, you probably heard people, you saw that a couple of these messages in here, and we're raining. You know, the snow levels are not very low right now. This is stuff that you're in Seattle right now, or you're in Portland, you're hearing the rain on your roof, and you're like, oh, maybe that's snow in the mountains. It's not yet, but that's coming. Look, as we go through Sunday, look at the rapid change come here. We flush the region with some nice cool air finally as we go on in through Monday. We might have some convective showers out there. Monday might be a fun day. Maybe I'll do some kind of a storm chase on Monday. And we get a little bit of a bounce back there, and we get another shot coming, as you see, as we go through the end of next week. I'm going to back that out a little bit there. There's Thursday. There we go. There's another shot right there. But again, we'll watch that one. CAPE. So what is CAPE? Convective available potential energy. That is what CAPE is. So it's basically telling you the actual potential for some convective. Here we go. Let me just do this. This will show you a little bit better. Basically, it talks about the instability in the atmosphere. So when you're looking at these soundings, we're going to look at the European here, and we're going to do Seattle. So the red line is temperature, the green line is dew point, and what you're looking at here is winds. You're looking at winds at the surface, and you can see how they turn a bit more southwesterly as you go up in the upper levels of the atmosphere. They turn westerly. They're around 5,000 feet, about 10,000 feet. They're out of the northwest, and you see they become stronger and more out of the north the further north you go. So what we're looking at here is a Skew-T chart, and if you look at that, you'll see how the winds are on this as well. This is what's known as a hodograph, and you can see you got the southwesterly winds. They turn a little bit more southwesterly, they turn westerly, and then eventually they turn northwesterly, and they become stronger. So that's a hodograph. So when we look at this, you can see that there's CAPE right there, surface CAPE. In this hodograph here, or the Skew-T, there is no instability in that. But if we scroll through, let me make sure this is, okay, here we go. So we're scrolling out a little bit into the future. I think this only goes out 90 hours if I'm not mistaken. No, we're going to get out to, we're going to get out towards Monday. Okay. So if we go on in through Sunday, now, you notice how we get the cooling aloft in some of the lower levels of the atmosphere there? You're starting to see a little bit of that CAPE. So we got the little bit of instability here, because when you have the surface a bit warmer, that warm air parcel wants to rise up there. And the cooler it is aloft, the easier that rises. So the measure of CAPE is basically here, where the parcel of air would rise based versus on the temperature there. So any kind of CAPE would show up. Let me see if I can get a sounding that has any kind of sliver of CAPE as well at all in there. I might have to go to the North American. No, I might not be able to get one here. So let me back that up. So this is where we are right now. And then of course we scroll through the next few days. Again, we still got some pretty warm air that we're dealing with here over the next couple of days. But as we go through next week, you can see that profile, the temperature profile. Notice that red line push off to the left. That's the upper levels of the atmosphere cooling down as we go on in through the day on Monday. So you're starting to deal with a bit more convective available potential energy there. That's Monday afternoon. You notice we got up to 180 there. So that's where we might get a thunderstorm or two across the region. That parcel of air is going to have an easier time to rise, and that's going to help with the convective process. So that's what CAPE is. Is this going to show anything in this? Let's see. Nope, we're not going out far enough, or are we? Oh, we are. We're out towards Monday here, but we're not getting enough where it's showing the actual profile there. But yeah, there is going to be some instability. It looks like maybe Sunday or Monday there. Must have rained a couple inches today near Arlington. What a soaker. Yeah, it's really bad up there. I mean, I can't believe how bad it is. Yeah, that's the thing too. When you learn about this stuff, like these Skew-T charts and whatnot, if you don't keep up on this stuff, you'll come back to it and you kind of know what things are. But man, you got to really stay sharp on this stuff. You got to really do some refresher courses, and there's some good classes you can actually do, like this MET-Ed. If you guys haven't heard about this, meted.acar.edu. You can actually take courses on stuff, and they have like a really good Skew-T course that you can take. I've taken it. Then they have a test that you have to take to pass it and whatnot. You get like a little certification and stuff. But yeah, there's all kinds of good stuff in here, that this MET-Ed, where you can take these courses. I don't know if it has my actual. Nope, it's not letting me. My password might have expired in there, but yeah, that's a really good way to learn things. It has all kinds of stuff you can learn on that MET-Ed site. How bad is it looking for Oregon Monday through Wednesday? Well, let me look at that one more time here. So we're going to look at, let's look at some of the timing of this. Why do I have 12Z data? Let's go to 18Z. So there's the rain going on, just the highest peak, seeing some snowfall. Looks like it actually lightens up a little bit tomorrow. Starts back up maybe a little bit there again on Sunday. That's where that frontal system comes sliding through. So, I mean, for Oregon, you're not talking about a lot of rainfall really until you get off in towards maybe the mid portion of next week. I mean, even then, some of the Cascades get a couple decent shots of snow, but it's not a lot. You can see it's favoring kind of BC and Western Washington, at least initially here. We'll see how that lines up. But got a pretty wet day looking like next Wednesday. Pretty potent frontal system rolling through there, and some lower snow levels here. This would get a bit more active. Kind of nice to see that. And then we get that bouncing a bit more south. We'll see how that goes as well. But yeah, unless you're going across the higher terrain, you're not expecting huge winds right now. There is going to be some pretty decent winds rolling through as we go through the day on Sunday, though, for Eastern Washington. Let me bring that up, and let's take a look at the latest on that. Here we go through Saturday night. Now we're going through Sunday. You're going to see the westerlies kick up. It's nothing too crazy, though. We got a good surge coming down the Strait of Juan de Fuca. So, yeah, Whidbey Island's going to get some nice westerlies there as we go through the day Sunday. And that's what's going to help kick a convergence zone probably across some of the Puget Sound there. You can see the winds wrapping around the Olympic Mountains, westerlies, southwesterlies meeting. Then you got the strong westerlies across some eastern Washington as well. Probably be some good gusts across the higher terrain. Let me back that up. So you can see that really happening on the day Sunday. Some pretty strong winds out of the west. They'll keep those wind farms working out there east of the mountains. Yeah, you'll get that MET-Ed site is really good. It's definitely a rabbit hole. Oh, what's going on here? We got a global warming issue going on. What's going on? Anything I can help with? Oh, Weather Academy. There's another one. Keith Caballero mentioning if you go to Weather Academy, you have some good courses. Maybe I'll check that one out also. Let's go all the way throughout. Let's see, there's a windy period right there as we go through. What's that? Wednesday morning, Oregon coast. 39-mile-per-hour gusts there on Wednesday night, Thursday morning for Seattle. Yeah, we do have some wind potential, but again, no big windstorm rolling in here just yet. Something we're going to be watching, though. Yeah, even the hardest, I see some of the discussion going on about global warming and stuff like that. I mean, there's really, I don't know. I think that where a lot of the confusion comes from is that the biggest thing for me is there's probably a difference in what people think we should do about it. Not necessarily, I think that most people understand that the physics are, there's really no debate in it. Whether if you dig up a bunch of oil and you burn it into the atmosphere and you release a bunch of carbon into your environment, you're going to warm the temperature. It's a greenhouse gas and things are going to warm. That is a fact. There is no debating that. And that's just the way it is. The problem is that some people will run a little bit too far with that and they'll make claims on what we should or shouldn't do about that. And that's where the debate is. It's like, but I think first of all, it's important to kind of understand that, hey, the warming is occurring. What to do about it is what we need to discuss. So, I mean, I don't think that we all need to go live as hippies in caves or anything like that. But I think that it's probably smart to assume some of the worst case scenarios possibly could happen, and we need to kind of prepare for that. I think that that's something that any normal person would do in most circumstances. If the worst, you got to kind of be ready for some of the worst case scenarios. You know, the planet that we live on, we don't know what exactly is going to happen if we continue to just burn fossil fuels at this rate as we go on in through the next 100, 200 years. I mean, what will happen? There's probably going to be unforeseen circumstances that we just cannot see right now. I mean, it's really, when you boil it down and you really have discussions, and if you were to sit down with somebody and talk about it, I think that you could probably come to some better agreement versus just kind of some of the things that we have going on in the internet where there's, you'll go on some of the internet sites and there's these huge battles back and forth, and it doesn't really convince anyone, of your viewpoint there when you get in those arguments. Yeah, a volcano can release CO2, but a simple Google search can tell you how much of volcanoes release compared to humans. Yeah, and there's big, the media will attach weather and they'll try to say this was because of climate change or not. And I mean, there's a little bit of truth to that because we changed the composition of the atmosphere. It's going to have some effect on the weather systems that are ongoing. How much is what's under debate. There's some debate to that on just how much things are being affected. But like a lot of well-known scientists say, the big issues are probably not coming here until around the year 2040, 50, 60. So we still have a few decades before the really big implications start. So one of my subscribe. So my problem is first saying that global warming is attributable to humans. Second, it's my understanding that CO2 effect tapers out at higher levels. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff you could look at. You could do probably a couple of Google searches on that if you want to check that out. There's a lot of good explanations for why humans are the main cause for why the planet is being warmed. But that's something that I'm not gonna. If somebody is set in their views, this become a very hot topic. So I find that it's better for anybody who kind of I'm pretty well versed on the scientific literature of what's going on, so I know what's likely to be happening with as much certainty as you can have. But people need to check this information out for themselves. I can't just scold somebody and make them, and just make them understand facts. They're going to have to look that stuff up by themselves. Yeah, humans contribute to climate change, and and mass deindustrialization is not the answer. I don't have any problem with that. I think that it's probably a very low percentage of people that think that we should just deindustrialize the planet. And no, volcanoes do not put out more CO2 than man does. That's a simple Google search, you guys. You can look that up. Yeah, I didn't talk about the cold air conduits much this year because we weren't. I did a couple times, but yeah, we haven't been getting the big Arctic air masses. We had the one pass by, and we did have some leaking out at times, but yeah, I didn't get to use the Purcell Trench or the Okanagan River Valley or the Fraser River Valley too much this year. Shameful, but maybe we'll get a great El Nino lowland snow event next year. Who knows? Cross your fingers. Yeah, the problem isn't that the planet is going through another change. I think this is something that really is very simple and it kind of gets lost. It's not that we're changing. It's not that the planet Earth will adapt to anything. The planet Earth isn't going anywhere. The problem is the rate of change. If you take a pan that's very hot and you dump it under cold water, you have a much higher chance of damaging that pan. This is kind of one of the analogies that I like to kind of tell people. It's the rate of change. If you let that pan cool down and then introduce it to cooler water, it's going to have a much easier time. You're not going to have problems with that pan. You can shatter pans and stuff like that, and you can break them, and the Teflon can mess up on the pans and stuff like that. We are changing the planet's temperature on a scale and on a rate that is not really has never been seen before, that we've ever been able to tell on any of our records. I mean, we're changing it at an extreme rate very quickly. Yeah, Garrett Hartung mentions that at no point we've had this rapid rate of change. And it's so political, and that's the problem, because we have very divided political parties here in the country, and there's a lot of propaganda out there. There's huge amounts of money from oil companies and places that have billions of dollars and trillions of dollars that it's worth it for them to muddle the waters. I mean, I don't know if I should be getting into this, but it's kind of a sore spot. I mean, if you think that the scientists making, what, $50,000, $70,000 a year is motivated by money, but a company that stands to lose huge amounts and billions of dollars is not, then you're probably not viewing it on a level playing field. No, it's normal. I don't want to scold people because there's so much bad information out there, but I don't know. Maybe I can bring a few things up here. I don't want to make people mad. I like talking to people about it. It's like, I don't think it needs to be a thing where we're in argument and stuff like that. But if you have ice core data and you can look back in the past, for example, we've had big changes in the past. There's no doubt about that. The climate will always change. There's always stuff going on as to why the climate will change. But you got to remember that these changes over the last 800,000 years, all these changes were happening for specific reasons. All these changes were happening for very specific reasons. And the reason why it is doing this now, where we are today, is because we are just a huge industrial effort of digging up the planet and burning it into our atmosphere. And I don't know, it's a pretty simple concept to grasp. We are flooding our atmosphere with carbon dioxide. And $2 Chuck, thanks for the generosity. But yeah, it's this rate of change that we're concerned about now. And obviously this is very concerning, and this is something that we need to address, and we need to come to some kind of agreement. With all this climate change talk, I take back my last super chat. Stop being so reasonable. I won't stand for it. It's political, but my goal is to try to make it not political. I mean, I am open to having discussion with people about it. And you'll see, I see a lot of mocking about the 97% of climate scientists believe that it's happening. And if you look at the scientific literature, there's thousands of papers about it. And virtually every single one, well over 99.9% of them, accept the fact that CO2 is, warming our planet. It's an undeniable fact. As much as gravity, there's no doubt about it. There really is none. And there's thousands of papers you can read for it. So this is from NASA anyway, but I don't know. I feel like people, because I get people that get angry about this a lot of times too. So I don't want to get too far into this. What else we got going on here? Yeah, and that's, well, I mean, like you mentioned, where all that carbon came from. The point is that the carbon was not in our atmosphere, and we dug it up and we burned it into our atmosphere, and that's obviously going to have some kind of effect. I've never met a person who denied climate change or not who would just outright say, "Well, it's just going to be that's not going to have any effect." I mean, I wouldn't sit in my garage with my car running and expect there to be no effect. Obviously, when we're burning up, we're digging up this much oil and burning it into our atmosphere, it's going to have an effect. Yeah, I've seen that too, Brian. There's so a lot of ships also are not emitting that as well. So the less sulfates, that's probably going to give us temporary warming here also. It's going to bump up the temperatures because we are not blocking, it's not blockers in the air like you mentioned. Yeah, that's the point right there. The Ron Cross, the phytoplankton had millions of years to build up. We're putting that back into our atmosphere in a couple hundred. I think most people understand that. So Fantana Ranja, it was in the atmosphere during way back in the past. I think that's fairly well understand. The problem is that it doesn't matter what happened then. It matters what happens now. Yeah, no, it seems like it's pretty actual. It's I think it's pretty, I know there's some people who I have viewers that don't think climate change is happening and stuff like that. So it's fine. We can discuss it and talk about it. You can ask questions. I'm not going to scold anybody for believing in it or not. And the thing also is that for a long time, like in the 90s, I was very skeptical of it, and I took a lot of convincing for me to believe it. And so it took me years. I argued against climate change for a long time. And then as I read more papers and I went to college and I studied it more and more and more, and I really wanted to know, is this actually happening? What does the literature say? It became just completely overwhelming. If you really put yourself into it and you go into it with an open mind, there's really no other path but to kind of understand that that's what our science tells us, is that it is actually occurring. Even the most hardened, professors will tell you that it's happening. They just kind of disagree on to what we should do about it for the most part. And that's the thing. I don't think that, we can act as a species and just kind of cut back on our emissions, and we'll eventually figure this out, and we're not going to destroy the planet. And I don't think we're going to kill, it's not an existential thing that we're going to kill half the population of the planet if we don't do something right now and we have to just stop everything. That's not the case. And I know some people will even try to tell you that because there's always that 5 to 10% of either the far right or the far left or the wacky loonies on each side of everything that will come out and just kind of make all kinds of wild claims. You'll never get people to agree on everything. I mean, 16, what is it? 16% of the people or 10% of the people believe the earth is flat. So, I mean, you're going to always have people like that. But the thing is to not accept what the wackos on each side, the extreme whack doodles on the left and the right have to say about it. You kind of stay somewhere in the middle and you have constructive conversations about everything. Well, yeah, it's hard. It's because it kind of takes, and then we put politics into it and stuff like that. And it's like, well, I really like this political leader and I've always been a Republican. So I don't want to believe that because, you know, I know that I've kind of, personally myself, I've leaned a little bit back and forth. I've been more left over the last 10 years of my life. I didn't always used to be that way. I was more right leaning. My friends kind of knew that I was a closet Republican and that was kind of how I was 20 years ago. And so I'll swing back and forth. I try not to get caught up in individual political parties and stuff like that. And so I'm probably more leaning left than I was then, but I try to stay away from the fringes and I'll try to let facts guide how I view things. So yeah, so it has become political. Climate change is definitely political, and it's very difficult to convince somebody without them doing it themselves about what political party you should support for what reason. So you're not going to have a lot of success doing that, I don't think, if you're scolding people and you're getting into arguments on the internet and stuff. All you can do is kind of point towards the facts, and they have to make that journey on their own. So this is actually, I believe this is Colorado State. So this is the infrared satellite imagery in Colorado State. That's some pretty cool stuff over here also. So you can go into like the mid-level water vapor loop. Yeah, I like watching that one. I don't know if the new GFS is running just yet, is it? It is. Look at that. Let's back up the GFS a little bit here. See if the GFS has any fantasy windstorms in it. See that Sunday system here, that system that slides through, that's going to be pretty windy across the Rockies and some portions of Washington and British Columbia here across the higher terrain. So that'll be a pretty good wind maker there on Sunday, Eastern Washington. Look at that. That's a pretty decent pressure gradient right there. 996. It's not bad. P. Baker, thanks for the generosity. What can we control? What can't we control? Maybe we should try something we can control and see what happens. We will figure it out. That's something I'm confident about. And anybody who says right now that it's an existential crisis and that humans are going to die, I disagree with that. I think that we will figure it out. But at the same time, there can be some pretty big problems that we will have to solve. And it's like anything else. Some of those problems can be very detrimental to some people, and other people will not feel those effects nearly as much, if at all. Grass Valley. What is Grass Valley? So let's see if the GFS does anything else. There's a decent low right there. That's a pretty good pressure gradient. We might get some wave watching there. Maybe next Wednesday morning. Cross your fingers. Maybe the GFS will be right about something. That's not a bad wind. Let's do this. That's not a bad wind maker right there. Up into BC. Have anything else after that? No. That little tiny low right there. You see that little low right here moving to the southern Oregon coast? That's some atmospheric river action after that. Yes, agree, $2 Chuck. We will figure it out. It'll be painful, yes, and we will persevere. Absolutely. I mean, I think we're smart enough to figure it out. We will have to, but at the same time, you still have to kind of give yourself a little like, hey, we gotta what we have to take care of this. And let's see what the GFS shows as far as precipitation. Look at north of Vancouver Island just getting hammered. And you can see, watch it shift south as we go on in through Monday. Let's see here. So there's the onshore flow. Not a lot for Seattle or Portland on the GFS run here. Some strong rain shadowing, but probably some convergent zone activity. Look at that on Thursday, though. We start to pick up some precipitation there. Even shares a little bit of that with Western Oregon. But again, the GFS, yeah, is that even really worth looking at? Whoa, look at that. I didn't even look at this. Okay. Okay, here we go. Is Garrett Hartung in the house to still here still? Check this out. Look at this. Look at that bullseye on the Oregon Cascades. I didn't see if that was warm or not, but I'll take a look at that here next. How about a foot of rain there across the Cascades of Washington, Oregon? That was the 18Z European Artificial Intelligence. So let's look back at that. Let's see. Let's do 24-hour 24-hour total. We're going to stop it on the biggest total here. Let's see. What, 3 inches? There we go. So we'll look at, actually, let's look at the first one. Hour 150. It might be on the, I don't know. Some of that will be falling as snow. But again, you got to default to the ensembles. The ensembles don't show nearly as much for the Oregon Cascades, but still not too bad. Over under on the first 70-degree day for Seattle. Do I get to look at the European? Let's just look at this really quickly here, because I don't know exactly. You can get them in March 24th, off the top of my head. The first 70-degree day is glorious indeed. So it does have some in the mid second half of March. It does have a bit of a warm spell there. We cool back down beginning of April, and then look at that. Some 70-degree days there in the early portion of April. Oh, what am I doing? This is truck Utah. I was wondering about that. I was like, why is that? Okay, so here we go. There's Seattle. Actually, March 25th. So I wasn't that far off. Actually, it might be March 24th. So maybe that's the over under. Probably something like that. Maybe the end of March, we'll get a 70-degree day. Yeah, and like I mentioned, the ensembles are not. April 14th, April 1st for Portland, first 70-degree day. Yeah, and so April 14th. Yeah, I see some ensemble members have some warmth coming in there as well. I have a hunch we'll get a warm spell at the end of March for some reason. Maybe that ridging. Washington Weather Chasers got my 85-degree fix in Tucson. Yeah, I got to spend a week in Florida in December. That was nice. It's nice taking vacations during the wintertime. You get out of here for a little bit, just for a couple days or so, and feel the warmth. Matthew Fab is going to be in finals week, and he's going to have to be dealing with all this active weather. Looks like lower elevation snow. Shows like it's done here on the extended, but yeah. So we get this good shot here coming up, and then it kind of tails off. And that's typically what happens is we go on in through these spring months, and our precipitation starts dropping off dramatically. The Pacific Northwest, one of the driest places in North America during the summertime. So yeah, when we go through late November, we start dropping the precipitation rate. The average precipitation starts dropping. And we get further on into March, April, it goes down and down. I mean, we're still getting rainfall and stuff, but the big rain months are definitely October, November, December, January. No, ski season's not over. We got some decent snow coming in here. And if nothing else, you can kind of see it hints at that a little bit here as we go through this upcoming week. Again, British Columbia, Washington are probably going to be targeted a bit more than what Oregon is going to be. And Oregon needs it the most. Oregon is the worst off as far as snow water equivalent is concerned. Let me update this. Yeah, some of these are pretty miserable looking. Southern Oregon coastal. The John Day still at record lows. I mean, a lot of times when we get that lower elevation snowfall, it kind of comes in convergent zones and comes when we got the cold air, the popcorn cumulus off the coastline, strong onshore flow, a lot of cold air aloft, and we have some convective processes going on. And sometimes these convergent zones can still bring some lower elevation snowfall. Sometimes you can get snow pellets or small hail to cover the ground, fun stuff like that. But you can still get snow, but it's really dropping off quite dramatically as we go through the month of March. And by the time you get to early April, there's still just a very, very low chance. And by then it's just gone. Rock skiing. Yeah, watershed basins. And if you can look at like the entire Pacific Northwest here. Oops. You can see the individual locations here as well. So if you go in like let's go a little bit farther here where Stampede Pass. So there's Stampede Pass where we're at now. And what we're usually at 31.8, and we're at, is that for real? My gosh. So yeah, there's usually like 32 inches of snow water moisture in that snowpack. And this year we have less than 10. Ouch. Yeah, man, the king tide there in, what was it? Was that November? That was awesome on the Washington coast. Big waves with the king tide. That was pretty scary being at Cape Disappointment there. I've never seen the water level. We were standing there in the parking lot, and it looked like the water level was higher than the logs a lot of the time. I mean, it was kind of creepy. And some of the big waves were breaking up on the rocks. And there was one of the Coast Guard guys was like standing on there and got washed off. It was a wild time. And those logs were moving big time. It was a pretty fun day. Yeah, there's about 10 inches of water up there at Stampede Pass in the snowpack, which is way below where we're usually at, over 31 inches. Great job on a moderate discussion of climate change. You do a good job of keeping it. Thank you. It goes a long way with helping people just kind of look into see what the actual facts are on it. Because I know the media doesn't do a great job communicating that a lot of the time, where it's like, you know, a lot of the storms right now, they're enhanced. They can be enhanced a little bit by climate change, but there's not, I don't think you generally speaking, you're not talking about life and death differences in these storms yet. Not to say that's not where some of this one might be going in the future, but overall, it's kind of a gradual thing. And like when I read some of Cliff Mass's old work and stuff like that, he talks about some pretty substantial differences as you go on in towards the later portion of the 21st century. And some of the data that he used to share was pretty striking, some pretty dramatic snowpack losses and things like that. And where we start to have disagreements on things like that is that um, it's not that easy. Obviously, our snowpack is our reservoir for the most part here across the Pacific Northwest. It's not as easy as just building reservoirs. And then even building reservoirs has a whole another litany of issues where it's hard to store the water. The dams get damaged. You have to buy people's property out to do it. And like, how are you going to store that water? And it's difficult. Then you have to release that water. Then you try to have it fill back up. And so when your snowpack decreases 10, 20, 30, 40% over the next 60 years, that's a big deal. And then what happens when you warm the Pacific Northwest a few degrees? Are we going to have much more prevalent insect infestation? Are we going to have other diseases we have no knowledge of that are going to infiltrate our region a bit more? There's all kinds of things. We have no idea how this is going to unfold. So that's just why we need to be aware of it. But at the same time, it's not like you're just going to have huge windstorms that are coming ripping into the Pacific Northwest, and they're going to be much stronger than they were in the past. And you're going to start killing people, and the flooding is going to be so bad that it just washes away a bunch of people in some huge floods and things like that. That's not really how it works. So when you see those media stories about, storms are becoming stronger, it's not that simple. The hurricane didn't get caused by climate change, but it can be enhanced slightly by it. It's a percentage. So yeah, there's things on both sides that need to be discussed. Ben's gonna fall asleep. Yeah, it's almost bedtime. I know I've been on here for almost 2 hours. I'm surprised I was able to talk this long. The older I get, the less stamina I have to just sit here and talk. Checking out some of the chat here. In 2015, I grew a watermelon in my backyard here in the Central Puget Sound. How about that? And it actually was good enough where we actually ate it. I don't know. Maybe some people do that in greenhouses and stuff, but we actually grew it outside and it actually grew in 2015. It's pretty funny. Yes, you're going to get snow coming up this week. Mount Baker for sure. Yep. How do I do? Oh, there's some cool stuff there. I can start poll, start Q&A. Members only live stream. But yeah, we're going to get active next week. Finally. I mean, there's still some question how this is going to unfold. You can see, I mean, I wish Oregon was getting more snowfall out of this. I did not want to see fires again going on in the Cascades there. Thanks for the kind words, $2 Chuck. Glad you guys are enjoying it. Still over 200 people in the chat. Glad you guys could turn out. It's kind of short notice, I know, and there's really, we have a good sequence of storms coming up here, and one of them may get pretty interesting. Some of those atmospheric rivers that we were seeing were pretty interesting looking. There's a 24-hour running total. Let's go through this really quick. So there could be some flooding concerns during some of this. As you see by next Thursday morning, 24-hour period there, you're talking about some pretty decent amounts in some of these ensemble members. But again, we'll play it step by step because I expect by tomorrow morning we'll wake up and we'll see some other wrinkles that are thrown into the forecast. 40 inches of snow coming. Yeah, I need to do a hype video here. Bruce Cruz, thanks for the generosity. Thank you for the live stream. Enjoy the weekend. Thank you, sir. We'll call it the Clint Eastwood Ridge, Dirty Ridge. All right, I think I've been on here for a while now, and I think I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going to go do my errands, walk the dog, and try to get some sleep. Hope you guys enjoyed the live stream. I should probably do these a little bit more often. I should probably try to do one a week or so, just to kind of show up and answer some questions. I mean, I know there's people that don't agree about climate change in this chat right now. You guys are very cordial. You guys, it was a good time. It was a good discussion. So I'm glad to see that. Sometimes it can get really nasty. I see some forums online and stuff like that, and some of the X conversations can get pretty heated. So it's good to see it in here that we're pretty cordial. But yeah, what else? I guess I'll do my normal forecast tomorrow as well. So hopefully you guys can check out that. And yeah, so I'm going to wrap it up here. And thanks for joining yet again.